A safe work environment is one where I'm able to create a safe space for myself.
Okay, so a safe environment does not mean that it's going to be a stress-free area for everyone. There's going to be stress in life, there's setbacks in life, there's failures in life, and some of those are going to be at work. What the issue is with stress is when it's unexpected stress, unnecessary.
Because it's so easy to humiliate ourselves when we don't feel confident that we're doing our best.
Gen Z, when they're setting their boundaries, they almost set it so that if they get stressed at work, the workplace is bad.
Community. When you set up so many boundaries and so many barriers between you and the people you're working with, for example, you lose community. You can no longer connect with anybody.
Life comes at you quick. How do you prepare yourself for a career that you can't even imagine yet? That's what Cam and I will delve into each episode on future-proofing your career. Cam, a retired professor, memoirist, and CPA, shares insights from his dynamic professional life, while I, a recent graduate and a young professional, voice the concerns of the next professional generation as we try to navigate a rapidly changing market. Learn how to arm yourself with an open and informed mentality that will take your career to the next level.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode with me, Lexi and Cam. Today, we're going to be talking about creating a safe work environment. Cam and I are going to take two different perspectives or takes on how to do this. So I wanted to start by saying that happy and content workers are better workers. But one thing that Cam and I truly believe is that when workers feel safe, they are going to be more happy and they are going to be more productive in the workplace. So to me, a safe work environment is one where I'm able to create a safe space for myself. And a lot of this has to do with this mentality of individuality. And so I can maintain myself and my safe work environment, and that's the reach of my scope. But sometimes, especially in older generations, there's a different perspective there. So Cam, how would you define a safe work environment?
Yeah, thanks, Lexi. I would focus on the psychological aspect of a safe work environment first, because psychological safety is such a gray area. What does it mean to be psychologically safe?
Yeah, that's a good point and a good distinction. When we're talking about safe work environment, Cam and I won't be looking at hazards in the workplace and all of that safety training you do at the beginning of every job, but more about how we create this psychological safe space. The first thing that I will talk about is how you create and feel confident in the work environment that you have control over. So, for our Gen Z listeners who aren't in positions of management, who can't make these big sweeping changes to how their companies run yet, there is work to be done on the inside to improve your circumstances and feel good in a job. And this can kind of link to what we talked about in the last episode about priorities. What I find is when you know what your priorities are, so you know what you're protecting, you're a lot more capable and confident in creating these safe work environments. So I'll give an example. In workplaces where I feel like I'm thriving or doing really well because I'm skilled in that area, I feel a lot safer and more confident to make decisions about what will benefit me the most. So, for example, I used to work at my school's writing center. And there I was tutoring, but I was also creating lecture content and running these lectures about creating really great writing. There, I was a really valuable resource. And so I felt super confident being able to protect my time and also felt confident going to my managers and saying, these are the tools that I need, which then let me create this really safe work environment for myself. And it mattered a lot less what my managers could offer me or what the structure of the writing center was, even though it was great, because I had the confidence in that role to make those calls for myself. So that's one really important piece of the puzzle and something that I've noticed a lot of the time from experience. But to contrast that, in the role that I'm in now, working in cybersecurity, when I first started, I didn't have all of the skills that I needed for that job. And what I noticed right away is I was so much less willing to put up those boundaries that made me feel safe. Not because the company was worse and not because I thought I was less valuable innately, but because I felt less valuable to the company since I was less experienced in that area. And so it was a real learning process for me to say, okay, I am valuable. They did pick me to do this job. I was the best candidate they interviewed. And so I have the conviction moving forward to set those boundaries.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm glad you mentioned the word confidence there, because as you were speaking, I realized your boundaries were getting more set as you built confidence in a job. And we've all had jobs where we didn't feel confident in what we were doing, and hopefully we can get over that. But that's a really good point, and that ties into feeling safe, having confidence that you can get the job done.
They picked you for the job. And so, this whole idea of imposter syndrome, not feeling valuable in the workplace or that you're doing enough, if you're honest during the interview process and you're trying your best every day, that you can have all the confidence to set those boundaries. Your best looks different every day, too. Your best on a day when you're feeling really crummy is still your best.
I like that you mentioned that as long as you're honest during the interview process, because I think that's where a lot of people get themselves into a bit of hot water. We all embellish on our resume in an interview a little bit. We call that puffery. But if you're actually fibbing, you're claiming you have skills you don't, that could lead to a feeling of not being safe at work with that lack of confidence. And I guess your point is if you're honest in the interview process, they should give you the time and the tools to learn.
Yeah, exactly that. The role that I'm in now, there was a lot that I didn't know, but with how this interview process worked, there was no room for me to lie. They knew exactly what they were getting, and they still picked me. And so every time I was fumbling around trying to learn a new UI or any of this stuff that was really unfamiliar to me at the time, they gave me so much room to take that all in and for trial and error. And I know not all companies are going to be like that, but that's where it comes to creating that safe work environment within yourself.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And what maybe I can do now is talk a bit about the work environment. What's a safe work environment versus one that isn't so safe? I do want to clarify for everyone that I am not a safety expert in any capacity. I do not have any certifications. I just have years and years of experience, and I've seen a lot of good in terms of companies making people feel safe, and I've seen a lot of bad. And so I'm just going to share some thoughts and ideas around what those are. Because to me, a company that focuses on safety, psychological and physical, and make sure that they stick with it, that becomes part of the culture. And people want to work in that kind of culture where they feel safe. And, you know, the people who work there are saying, yeah, you should come work here. It's a safe environment. They might not use those words, but they would say it's a great place to work. Okay, so a safe environment does not mean that it's going to be a stress-free area for everyone. There's going to be stress in life, there's setbacks in life, there's failures in life, and some of those are going to be at work. So we all need to be prepared for a certain level of stress. If you look at your contract that you signed, everyone, and all the contracts I've signed in my life, none of them promised a stress-free work environment. So safety and stress don't go hand in hand. What the issue is with stress is when it's unexpected stress, unnecessary stress. Those are what really bother people and make them feel unsafe. I remember a guy at a company I worked for, and he had booked a holiday like 3 months before the vacation. And as the vacation day approached, it was clear that that was going to be a busy period in his department. And it wasn't supposed to be a busy period. It just happened to turn out that way. So this poor guy, when he told people I'll be on holidays, they really started coming down on him to the point where the team leader sent out an email basically saying, since everyone on the team is not dedicated to the cause, some of us are going to have to pick up the slack. And it was that kind of messaging that just makes people feel like, I don't want to work here. That's the kind of thing, to me, that's what can really make people feel psychologically unsafe.
I wanted to give an example in regards to the stress that does happen in a work environment but can be handled really well. At my job right now, we're transitioning everything from our old website to our new website, a new website. And that's requiring us to use a new platform. learn new ways of organizing information and coding and all of that. And we have this really strict deadline, May 1st. Everyone is very clearly super stressed about it. And it is stressful. It's stressful learning new things on a timeline, and it's really stressful feeling like maybe you're falling behind your coworkers and all of that. However, there hasn't been a single second so far during this transition when our management hasn't been incredibly supportive, understanding that people are still learning. There hasn't been a single second when anyone on the team hasn't been willing to help anyone else. And one of my best work friends is gone right now. She's on a trip. And it just so happened to fall when this transition was happening. And again, nothing. All of us split up her section and I've taken on her area to transition it for her. And yeah, we're all stressed because of it. But the work environment that I'm in is set up in such a way that there's been no blame, there's been no hard feelings. And it's really just been a group effort to try and get everything done and to also listen to each other and our feelings of stress. It's very validating. It's definitely how stress is handled rather than if stress exists.
Yes, you brought up a great point about the teamwork. That's a big part of feeling safe, is feeling that the team has your back. Teamwork and collaboration, I think, is will be a future episode, something we can expand upon. And along these lines, I've just set up this employee survey. The answers to the questions could point organizations to where maybe they need to think about safety a bit more. So this is just food for thought. So here's the first one. On a scale of 0 to 10, indicate the likelihood that you will be humiliated at work at some time in the near future. And hopefully that's 0 for most people, but I've worked at places where it would definitely not be 0 in terms of the likelihood of humiliation.
About humiliation as well, that's where it's a really big deal that you have that safe work environment within yourself, because it's so easy to humiliate ourselves when we don't feel confident that we're doing our best. I am by far the least experienced on my team because I'm the newest and straight out of school. And so it would be really easy for me to feel humiliated that I'm not adapting to this new platform as quickly as everyone else who's had 10 plus years of experience in technical writing and these types of platforms. But I'm trying really hard not to place that humiliation on myself because it's not warranted.
That's a great point. And that comes back to being nice to yourself, self-compassion, which we won't get into today, but self-compassion is a big part of guarding yourself against humiliation, right? Okay, I'm going to move on to the second question. On a scale of 0 to 10, indicate the likelihood that someone at work will be rude to you in the near future. That's probably not going to be 0. I mean, people are people, but that number shouldn't be too high. If everyone in the company is putting 9 out of 10, then it's probably something to look at.
It's important too to note who is it that's being rude, because if it's your coworker who's on the same level as you, that's one thing. But if it's management who are being disrespectful or rude, that's a whole other issue that can have a lot less to do with people being people and a lot more to do with company culture.
And the silo effect. That's a good point. Really good point. Yeah, so a high score there would be a red flag for an unsafe work environment. Okay, third question. On a scale of 0 to 10, indicate your level of security that you will still have your job in 6 months if you want to. And hopefully that would be high, right? But some people go to work not knowing if a layoff's coming today or next week or next month. That's got to be a tough work environment to focus when you have that hanging over you.
One thing that I've noticed in my position is I'm a contract worker for now, and I'm hoping to be transitioned into full-time employment. One thing that I've really respected and appreciated that's made this contract position feel as safe as a contract position can feel, at least, is that my manager has had a lot of transparency with me. He has been so kind and open about where the budget's at, what it looks like his managers are going to allow him to do with headcount, reminding me that if I need to take another position to ensure job security, that there's no bridges burned. He's been so kind and so open that I feel safe to make the decisions that are best for me. And I do know that as soon as there is news, I'm going to hear about it. Transparency between your managers in you is huge.
Trust and transparency sometimes go hand in hand, right? If someone's transparent with you, you're going to trust whatever they tell you. Okay, I'm going to read two in a row because they're similar. On a scale of 0 to 10, indicate the quality of your relationship with your direct boss. And then on a scale of 0 to 10, indicate the quality of your relationships with coworkers, because those can indicate safe or unsafe work environments. On a scale of 0 to 10, indicate how much you feel heard at work. That's back to the psychological safety. If you are heard at work and your opinion and your thoughts matter, you're going to feel much more secure and safe in your job, generally speaking.
I think that loops right back to transparency as well. If you're able to be transparent and voice your needs and understand that they're going to be heard and considered as much as possible, then it makes you feel valuable. And when you feel valuable, you're more likely to create this safe work environment within yourself, even if it can't be guaranteed where you're working. So it's this kind of positive feedback loop.
On a scale of 0 to 10, indicate how psychologically safe you feel at work.
That survey is great. One of the biggest holes in corporate culture that I've witnessed so far and heard about from friends who are also entering the working world this year is that there are these huge gaps in critical thinking about how you participate in your career. I think it's something new that Gen Z are doing a lot more than maybe other generations. And Cam, maybe you can debate me on this a little bit. It seems like Gen Z are taking control or agency over how they're treated in the workplace, how they experience the workplace, and how they're valued in it. For example, job hopping is super encouraged amongst my generation. We know that when we're not being valued at a company, we should leave. We know that we'll receive higher salaries through job hopping than we will through promotion. And we also are really trying as a generation to protect our boundaries around work and social life to make sure they're not bleeding into each other, because it's so possible with how remote work has kind of blurred the lines between the two. It's interesting to hear from an older perspective what this critical thinking can look like, and also that you're encouraging it based on what you've seen. So Gen Z are just winging it. We're new, we're trying. It's really interesting to hear that from someone who's had this whole career behind them. You're also noticing that need for critical thinking.
Critical thinking is so important, but that term, it just turns people off because of the word critical. But I agree with you 100% that critical thinking is, for every generation, is extremely important. I think we should actually have an episode about that in the future. You said a couple of other interesting things about job hopping, was one. And that hasn't changed, because in my day as well, we had to job hop. It's, for some reason, the company you worked for wouldn't value you as much as a stranger company. And that's seems to be, if it's still going on, always the way it's worked. You mentioned something interesting about setting boundaries, and I agree, we all need to set good boundaries. One of the things I mentioned earlier was people can't expect a stress-free work environment. I wonder sometimes if Gen Z, when they're setting their boundaries, they almost set it so that if they get stressed at work, the workplace is bad. That's not necessarily true, because we talked about good stress, the expected stress. Okay, that should be within people's boundaries. You need to expect some stress at work and some setbacks. There's going to be things that happen, but the boundaries should definitely guard against the unexpected and the unnecessary stress.
Absolutely. And I've seen so much of this on social media as well, where creators are making these videos about boundaries that are very unrealistic, especially just you're an adult, do adult things. These videos are not doing as well anymore. And if they are doing well on a scale of how viral did it get, for example, it's because people are responding to those videos saying, "What the heck are you talking about?" I think that social issues like this swing on a pendulum. And so they usually start with the pendulum way to, I don't know, for example, the left side, and it swings all the way to the right side. Usually that's an overcorrection. And then by the end, it's somewhere in the middle. It kind of falls to the middle of the swinging pendulum and rests there, because That's where it feels most natural. I often find this overcorrection is really quickly combated. And I think right now we're in that stage as Gen Z of really disputing this idea that we shouldn't ever feel uncomfortable in every situation, mostly because it's getting exhausting.
Good, because you cannot grow unless you get out of your comfort zone. There's
Yeah.
no growth in a comfort zone. It's kind of like I compare it to stretching, and I know that sounds hokey. If you stretch and you don't feel any discomfort, you're not growing in terms of your flexibility. And same with the work environment. If you're not doing things that make you feel uncomfortable once in a while, like a presentation in front of people or what things like that, your growth is going to be stifled. So these social media ideas really need to be taken with a pinch of salt.
It is a chronic issue too of my generation to swing towards this, like I've said before, individual mindset. And the issue with that becomes you lose community. When you set up so many boundaries and so many barriers between you and the people you're working with, for example, you lose community. You can no longer connect with anybody. Why would you want that? And also, in all of the ways I've described that my team really thrives at work, you would completely get rid of that and impede that progress and that teamwork. I hope that tampers out with my generation because I think it is so harmful. I also see it as a maybe a coping mechanism to the onslaught of opinions that we're forced to hear on a daily basis. If you're on social media at all, you do have to kind of put up these barriers. It is more nuanced than maybe we give credit for because I don't think any other generation quite understands the level of influence that we have experienced since we were kids.
Right, that makes sense. And just my thoughts on your generation. Some people just spend way too much time on social media, and because there's so much misinformation on it, they just get the wrong ideas about what a safe work environment should be, could be. And to your point, if people set up boundaries such that it's stifling collaboration with coworkers, then they've gone too far. And, that's another topic to get into, but
Yeah, I think it all circles back to that critical thinking bit too. I think you can consume as much media as you like, and for a lot of people, it is one way to decompress. But really think about what you're consuming and think about how it applies to you or how it doesn't apply to you, because not everything has to apply to you. We talked last week about starting a new tradition on this podcast, and we're going to continue with that this week with the lightning round. So that's when Cam and I come up with questions for each other. We don't have any time to prepare for them. So, Cam, do you want to start with your lightning round question?
sure. So this little game is name something that. Okay, so name something that made you feel unsafe at work or school.
At work, when a manager did not give me time to explain what had happened a shift previously, and instead just took me into her office and screamed at me.
Yeah, that would, right? A lot of bosses do that. They vent, they freak out, and then they do their due process to find out what really happened. The thing I wrote down was I had so many bosses that enjoyed making their employees squirm,
Mm,
asking them questions they couldn't answer and giving them projects that were doomed for failure. I don't know why that happens with so many bosses. Okay, I have one more. Name something that for you. Name something that made you feel really appreciated at work.
okay, I feel really appreciated at work. And this is an example I already mentioned in the podcast. When my boss has taken the time to pull me aside during this contract position and have transparency with me, because that just tells me he values how I'm feeling on a day to day basis about my security at the company. Job security is my number one concern right now with contract work. So definitely him addressing that and making sure that I feel valuable enough to have answers is huge.
Okay, that's good. That's great. So as a professor, I've over the years I've told people you need to reward your best workers, right? To try to it's incentive. And a lot of the pushback was, well, we don't have the budget to reward people. And I want to give an example of a reward, I consider it a reward, that was free of charge. There was no money involved. It was Bell Mobility. This is in the late 90s. And I went into work one day and turned my computer on like every other day. And there was an email sitting there, and I was CC'd on the email. And it was from my boss to his boss, who was the senior vice president of the company, one of them. And the email just basically said, "Hey, I just want to share with you the great things Cam's been working on lately." And then there were these bullet points of projects I had made progress on, giving me visibility to the senior vice president with that email. I mean, I was floating around the office that day. And that's the kind of boss that makes you feel really safe and really good about yourself as well. You don't need to spend money to show people appreciation. You don't need to spend money to make them feel good. But then in a lot of other cases, people can appreciate you just by showing some more patience. And like you said, being transparent.
And if you've read Cam's memoir, you know how important something is when he describes him feeling like he's floating. Okay, so my lightning round is I'm going to list 4 things. And for each of them, I want you to answer whether or not you would sacrifice in some way that thing for a safe work environment. Would you sacrifice your salary? So, would you take a lower salary if it meant working in a safer work environment?
Yes, as long as we're not talking significant.
Yeah.
But yes, it would be worth it. Less than 10% would be worth it in many cases.
Yeah. And that's how I feel with remote work as well. I would take a lower salary to do remote work. So I understand that.
Right.
Would you sacrifice a position or title at your workplace to create a safe work environment? For example, maybe you're up for a promotion, but you speaking up about something could jeopardize it.
If it was really important to me, I would sacrifice the promotion. In
Okay.
fact, I thought I was going to get fired once because the boss wanted a new method, a new policy that would create an unsafe environment for my people. And right in front of the boss, I went against what she said. I said, "I'm not doing it your way. It's not right." So she approached me at the end of the day, and I thought it was, to say goodbye. I'll give her so much credit for this. She said, "You know what? Having watched your way is better, and we're going to do it your way from now on." But yeah, I would be willing to sacrifice the promotion, the extra money, if I saw something new, some new idea was going to be unsafe. I would have to speak up about it.
Amazing. And that example answers my next one, which was leadership's approval. So clearly, you're going to prioritize the safe work environment for your employees over the higher ups approving.
How many of my bosses were so glad when I quit, when I resigned? Because if I saw something that wasn't right, now I didn't argue with them about everything, but if it was important enough to me to risk whatever happened next.
That's awesome. Okay, and the last one is free time. So would you sacrifice free time, or maybe another way to put it is, would you put in overtime to create a safe work environment?
Yes. That's a tough one because it's probably case by case. But if working extra hours, which, my generation, we just got used to that. It was expected. If I could see that the value was added by the extra work in terms of additional safety, yes, that would be worth it.
Amazing. Okay. Well, those are all of my lightning round questions. Cam, do you have any closing thoughts for this episode?
Yeah, I just want to really encourage our listeners to take all of our thoughts as just food for thought. People can take away and think about creating a bit of a safer work environment.
I'll second that and say that if you have a job, you were hired for a reason. They saw something in you. And as long as you're putting in the best you can on a given day, then you should give yourself credit for that and move forward with confidence and protect your peace when you can. All right, well, that's all from us. So thank you so much for listening. And we'll have a new episode out shortly.
Thanks, Lex.